Today we're going to do a little turning on the wood lathe. This is an old Craftsman wood lathe that a very good friend of mine gave to me. And it's about as good a one as we need. We don't do a whole lot of turning. We have customers that come in and they'll say, can you duplicate something for me? And this is an example. I had a customer that needed some spindles, and we turned several of those. This is one, they're so thin. This is one that broke, so it was a reject. But I had to do 4 or 5 of those. Very delicate to duplicate something like that. Today we're going to do something a little bit more simple. I've got a customer who broke this thing and he kind of wants to replace it. So we're going to try to turn that. The first thing we do is we get a block of wood and we square it up so that it's good and true and square. Second thing we do is we find the center of each end. Okay, I've got a little square that's got a 45 degree. I go from corner to corner and mark the 45 degree, both from all 4 corners, so I find a center point. And I do that on both ends. Okay, now I have a center point on both ends of this block of wood. Next thing I do is load it on the lathe. I take that center point and I put it in this chuck. I take that, it's got a point on it. I put it right in that point. I'm going to knock it in so it stays in place. Then I move the other chuck. And then I tighten this up so we get a good grip on the wood. Am I turning it around? There we go. This is just a screw that screws that tip into there and gets it good and tight. So it holds that wood in the exact position. I've loaded it in, it won't move while I'm working. Okay. All right, now this is a, I put this about halfway up on the piece of wood. And parallel to the wood. And get it good and tight so it won't move. All right, then I want to move it so I'm in the center of the wood. It's important that everything is good and tight. And square. All right, now we're ready to start doing some work. The first thing I have to do, since I'm making a round piece of wood, I've got to round this over. I use a roughing gauge or gouge, and it just roughs it out until it's round. Okay, now I've rounded it in the center, but I need to round a little bit longer. So I'm going to have to move this just a little bit. Okay, now I've got enough rounded over that I can make this part. The next thing I do is I use a caliper, and I'm going to find the part, the area on this part that has the biggest diameter. And then I'm going to cut this piece down so it is that diameter in a circle. Okay. The next thing I want to do is take this part and I'm going to put pencil marks on here so I can show where the high parts are. So I marked the high parts and the low parts in this one section. And then I'm going to take a different tool. This is called a spindle gouge, and you can do a little bit more detailed work with it. I'm going to keep my part over here. I got to kind of keep an eye on what it looks like. I want to reset this so I can get this diameter of this part of it the right diameter. Okay. I'm checking the different diameters so that I can cut these curves to the right shape so that you have your different diameters in the part and not the way these are. Then I'm going to also mark where the high points are again. It's basically a series of checking your diameters and then cutting down to those diameters at the right points. And the caliper tells you when you've got it right. And that's turning a piece out on the lathe. The next thing I got to do is, because the parts are so small, you can use a parting lathe. I guess I'll be part of it with a parting lathe, a parting tool. But I can't cut it completely off. Take my parting tool again. Okay, now we've duplicated the part. I'll cut that off with the bandsaw, sand it rounded. I'll cut this off with the bandsaw and flatten it, and we've duplicated the part that we were trying to duplicate for a happy customer. Most of these are high-speed steel, which holds a good sharp edge for a long time. But you can get them in various sizes. These are both the same tool, but one's bigger than the other one. You got these scrapers that are mainly just used to scrape out. I mean, if that was exactly the right size, I could easily round that out and get that shape on it. And there's just a series of tools. This is a gouge. A spindle gouge, it's called a spindle gouge, and it's used for doing, spindles, and you can turn it. If you're really good, I would have a hard time doing a corkscrew on a lathe because I'm not familiar with doing that. But and then also another tool that's very common. This is just a rasp or a file that you can file down pieces with it. You can spend as much money on a lathe as you want to. This is an old antique lathe, but you can spend thousands and thousands of dollars on a wood lathe. We don't do enough work to justify having an expensive lathe. We probably do maybe 1 or 2 turns a month is all we do. And it's usually a specialty item, like somebody has broken something or they're replacing an item that needs to be replaced. And you can't call a manufacturer and say, send me one of these. That's pretty much what we do. Like I said, we really enjoy doing lathe work. We don't do large pieces too much. We do mostly smaller pieces. And we do it kind of on the side just to help people out who've got a part that they can't replace.
Where did you happen upon an antique lathe? Is that from?
I bought a lathe, and when we started turning, and it lasted 5 or 6 years, and it went bad. And I had a real good friend of mine. I told him, I said, man, I'm sure looking for a lathe that doesn't cost much money. He said, well, I've got one in my shop that a friend of mine gave to me, and I've never put it together. So we got the lathe, and we made a table for it, and we set it up and bought a new belt for it. Now you can change the speeds by moving the belt. It's got a series of pulleys on the end. You can change the speed. I usually run at this higher speed, but if you've got some work that requires a slower turning, you just move the belt. It takes a little while to do it, but that's where we got this lathe. It was from a very, very, very good friend of mine, and he had it in his shop and never used it, and it's sat in his shop for 5 or 6 years. And he says, why don't you come and get this lathe and see if you can make it work? So that's what we did. It saved me, the alternative was either I quit turning altogether or I had to buy a new lathe. And it's, like I said, it just is hard to justify spending the money on a good lathe to do 1 or 2 turns a month. And we get the job done with our old antique lathe. Have fun doing it.